In times like these, even the smallest short-lived wins deserve some attention. They do, especially when they come from the conservative, packed Supreme Court. This time that win is for a group of Venezuelan migrants. The Trump administration tried to deport without due process under a dusty 18th century law, the Alien Enemies Act. In a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court said not so fast. It's a pause, it's just temporary, but it's also a crack in the MAGA armor. A reminder that even this far-right court isn't always willing to rubber stamp Trump's worst instincts.
So, Casey, this is a loss for President Trump, but this is not the final word. We know that he wants to speed up deportations. And as part of that plan, he has invoked the Aliens Enemies Act, which allows him to proceed with deportations with less review than he would otherwise. And here today, the Supreme Court has blocked the president from moving forward with deportations under this act for a group of immigrants in northern Texas. So he's siding with a group of Venezuelans in Texas who are worried that they were going to be imminently removed under this authority. Now, while this is, again, a significant loss for the president, this is temporary, and this underlying legal fight continues to play out across the country.
The Supreme Court ruling the Trump administration must give Venezuelans more time to challenge their deportations under an 18th century law. In the 7-2 decision, the justices saying notice roughly 24 hours before removal, devoid of information about how to exercise due process rights to contest that removal, surely does not pass muster. The ruling dealing a blow to President Trump's efforts to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to send Venezuelans, who he says are gang members, to a notorious prison in El Salvador.
This decision is the court saying again that people who are immigrants, even if they are undocumented immigrants, even if they are alleged members of a Venezuelan gang, are entitled to that due process. This injunction that they're continuing right now is going to last for some time. It's going to last until that lower court, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, not only makes its decision, but until any petition for review by the Supreme Court is disposed of. We're used to thinking about all of these emergency cases that are percolating through the court. But you and I both know in the ordinary course, it takes a long time for a case to go through the traditional appeals process.
First, let's be clear, this wasn't a sweeping victory. The court didn't rule on whether Trump can ultimately use the Alien Enemies Act to deport thousands. What they did say, though, is that the Fifth Circuit messed up by ignoring basic due process. And more importantly, the justices made one thing crystal clear. Undocumented immigrants, yes, even those detained, still have constitutional rights. That alone dismantles the MAGA myth that once you're labeled illegal, you lose your humanity, your voice, your right to fair treatment under the law. You don't.
Under the Alien Enemies Act, if there is a group that is associated with a foreign government or a foreign nation, and they've either been part of an invasion or a declared war, then the president has inherent authority to deport them. At the beginning of World War II, President Roosevelt wanted to deport a group of brown shirters that were associated, a gang associated with the Nazis. Would we give them a hearing? We would not, because it's a political decision, and an invasion is a political decision as well. So in my view, the court shouldn't even be involved in this.
Then, as usual, Fox News went full white panic mode. Some commentators actually compared these migrants, many of whom have no proven connection to any violence or wrongdoing, to Hitler's brown shirts. Let's just pause here. The brown shirts were a paramilitary wing of the Nazi Party. They beat, murdered, terrorized civilians under Hitler. To compare desperate asylum seekers from Venezuela, many fleeing hunger and dictatorship, to literal Nazi thugs, it's not just bad faith fear-mongering. It's a dangerous and dehumanizing lie that primes Americans to accept mass deportation. It's not only necessary, but morally righteous.
They haven't invalidated this act at all. And if you read the tea leaves, they're basically saying the act is okay, and they're signaling they're going to uphold the act in and of itself and the administration using this act to deport illegal aliens. Their issue really seems to be breaks down to how the administration is applying it, the process, and how much notice people are getting to challenge the act when it's being applied to them. What's really unfortunate about this is the Supreme Court says they have issues pleased with the process, but they can't just say, okay, we'll follow this process and it's okay. It seems to be a convoluted way to get to a result. But ultimately, I think this isn't as big of a loss for the Trump administration as some are reporting. I think ultimately he'll be successful on this issue and being able to use this act to deport the most dangerous criminals.
Clearly, as you've seen, Fox News just can't help itself from whining about this momentary setback in their mass deportation efforts, even though the network believes that the Trump administration will ultimately get what they want in the end. And let's be honest, that's exactly what they're betting on, that the Supreme Court will eventually rule that Trump can invoke the Alien Enemies Act however he pleases, that mass deportations can resume, legally sanitized by a court ruling, no matter how unconstitutional or inhumane. So while Fox is feigning outrage now, they're actually just playing the long game, waiting for SCOTUS to greenlight Trump's war on immigrants.
I have a lot of concerns about the lack of due process that your agency has been affording people in this country. In Texas, for example, you had rounded up 171 individuals, were preparing to deport them, and it wasn't until the Supreme Court issued an opinion that that was unconstitutional and that their due process rights were being violated did your agency actually stop and adhere to the Supreme Court's opinion. My question to you is, has those efforts ceased in your agency? Are you going to cease trying to deport people without access to due process in the courts of law in compliance with the United States Supreme Court?
Well, Congresswoman, we are following due process and using it as to how Congress has laid out to us in statute, and we are complying with all federal judges' orders as well.
Well, you weren't complying at that time. It took the United States Supreme Court to order you to comply, so you hadn't proactively complied on your own. You were intending to wrongfully deport people without access to a court hearing, without access to the rule of law, and that is why it was necessary for the United States Supreme Court,
due process does not guarantee a hearing,
who issued an opinion ordering you and your agency to comply with the due process rights of the people in this country. That's what separates, that's what makes our country great, is we do have access to due process. And so my comment to you is I'm hoping as you move forward, because initially as you were proceeding through these deportation processes, you were not affording people due process, and the Supreme Court has now ordered you to do so. So I am assuming by your testimony that you do intend to comply with the Supreme Court's order moving forward, and we're not going to have any more instances of wrongful deportation without proper access to due process. Is that correct?
We are following federal judges' orders, and
Good.
we are complying with due process
Well, we look
procedures
forward to
as
that.
they are laid out, as Congress has given us those tools to do that.
Thank you.
Government just deported a U.S. citizen with no meaningful due process. Madam Secretary, I think we're all in agreement here. Let's go after MS-13. Let's go after drug dealers. Let's go after Tren de Grúa, the bad folks who hurt my community as well as everybody else's community. But I fail to see where a child, 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old children could be on your top of priorities for deportations. This is still America. Due process, the Fifth Amendment. Deporting U.S.-born children, ignoring their attorneys.
And now enter Kristi Noem. No accountability for the dog shooting, book censoring, lie-telling future VP hopeful. And she's right in lockstep with the round 'em all up chorus selling cruelty as strategy. But contrast that with Representative Lou Correa, who said plainly, this is not who we are. And you know what? He's right. Mass deportation isn't a solution. It's a stunt. It's not policy. It's politics. And if he won't fix the border, which it won't, it's not going to make anyone safer. What it will do is tear families apart, stoke fear, gut our credibility as a country that claims to stand for liberty and justice for all.